Welcome to Heartline Stories, where twists and turns keep you on the edge of your seat. Today, we bring you an incredible tale about love, loss, and a shocking revelation that will leave you wondering how the pieces fit together. She fainted on divorce day, but what her ex uncovered in the hospital changed everything. A secret so unexpected, it could rewrite everything they thought they knew. Stay tuned for a story that's bound to surprise you. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to catch more unforgettable moments. In a small town surrounded by green hills and sunny skies, there lived a woman named Rebecca and a man named Jason. Rebecca loved baking pies, and Jason loved fixing old cars. But over time, they started arguing about little things. Eventually, they decided it was better to go their separate ways. Their divorce day came, and both of them tried to stay calm, even though their hearts felt heavy. On the morning of the big day, Rebecca wore her favorite yellow dress, the one with tiny white daisies. She wanted to show she was strong, even if her heart wasn't. Jason arrived wearing his usual worn-out jeans and a plaid shirt. They met at the lawyer's office, sitting across the table without saying much. The lawyer gave them papers to sign, and Rebecca suddenly felt dizzy. She stood up to get some fresh air, but before anyone could stop her, she fainted. Jason's eyes widened, and he rushed to her side. "Rebecca," he called, shaking her gently. The lawyer quickly called for an ambulance. Rebecca opened her eyes for a moment and whispered, "I'm okay," before passing out again. Jason's hands trembled as the paramedics arrived and carried her into the ambulance. Without a second thought, Jason climbed in with her. At the hospital, Jason sat nervously in the waiting room. He watched as nurses and doctors hurried in and out of rooms. He stared at the ground, tapping his foot. Memories of their happy moments flashed in his mind, like when they danced in the kitchen to old songs or laughed until their stomachs hurt during a camping trip. Finally, a doctor came out. "Mr. Jason, we need to talk about Rebecca," she said in a serious voice. Jason felt his heart drop. "What's wrong with her?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor hesitated, then said, "Rebecca didn't faint because of stress. We found something during her tests, something unexpected." Jason's mind raced. "What do you mean?" he asked, standing up. The doctor looked at him with kind but worried eyes. "We need to run more tests, but there's a chance Rebecca has—" Before the doctor could finish, Rebecca's nurse appeared in the hallway. "She's awake and asking for you," the nurse said, interrupting the conversation. Jason hurried to Rebecca's room. She looked pale but gave him a weak smile. "Hey, troublemaker," she joked softly. Jason pulled a chair next to her bed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to change their lives. "What did the doctor tell you?" Rebecca asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Jason looked into her eyes, hesitating. They're still figuring it out," he said, not wanting to worry her just yet. Rebecca reached out to hold his hand. "Jason, whatever it is, we'll deal with it," she said, her voice stronger now. Jason nodded, squeezing her hand. Deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of something they couldn't have imagined. Jason sat quietly by Rebecca's side, her hands still clasped in his. The beeping of the monitors filled the silence in the room, punctuating the unspoken worries hanging in the air. Rebecca's curious eyes studied his face, as though she could read his thoughts. Jason tried to hide his unease, but Rebecca wasn't one to be easily fooled. "What did the nurse say to you earlier, Jason?" "Don't sugarcoat it," Rebecca pressed gently. There was a firmness in her voice, even though she looked tired. Jason hesitated for a moment. They said they're still looking into it, he admitted. The doctor mentioned they found something unexpected, but they didn't tell me much more. Rebecca frowned but nodded slowly. Unexpected, huh? That's mysterious, she said, trying to lighten the mood with a small smile. Jason managed a chuckle. Yeah, leave it to you to turn something serious into an adventure, he replied, his voice soft but carrying a twinge of affection. Just then the doctor entered the room, carrying a clipboard and wearing a calm but serious expression. She looked at Rebecca and Jason as though carefully choosing her words. Rebecca, we've run some initial tests, and there's something we need to investigate further, the doctor began. Your fainting episode wasn't caused by dehydration or stress. There's an indication that, well, there might be a condition we didn't expect to find. Rebecca sat up a little straighter, her expression now a mix of curiosity and worry. What kind of condition? She asked. The doctor glanced at Jason briefly before continuing. It could be related to something in your blood work. We need to perform more tests to be certain. Jason's jaw tightened. He could see Rebecca's mind working, trying to piece together what this could mean. But before either of them could ask another question, the nurse reappeared. Doctor, we've prepared the testing room, the nurse informed her. The doctor nodded. Rebecca, we're going to take you for a few more tests now. Jason, you're welcome to wait here or step out for a bit. Rebecca looked at Jason and gave him a small smile. I'll be okay, she said, her voice steady. Jason reluctantly nodded, his heart heavy as they wheeled Rebecca out of the room. As the door closed, Jason sank back into the chair, his thoughts racing. What could they have found? And why did it feel like this was only the beginning of a much bigger story? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos of the life they had shared together. There were pictures of them building a bookshelf, which fell apart a week later, cooking messy dinners, and laughing at the park. They had their ups and downs, but those moments were real. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening now, it was going to bring them closer together or pull them further apart. Jason couldn't sit still. The waiting room felt too quiet, except for the ticking clock on the wall. He stood up, paced back and forth, and finally stepped outside to breathe some fresh air. The hospital garden was peaceful, with birds chirping softly and flowers swaying in the evening breeze. But Jason's thoughts were far from calm. He pulled out his phone and dialed Rebecca's best friend, Rachel. She picked up quickly, her voice concerned. Jason, what's going on? You never call me. Jason explained everything. Rebecca fainting, the hospital, the doctor's mysterious words. Rachel gasped. Oh my goodness. Have they told you anything yet? No, not really. They're still running tests, Jason replied, rubbing the back of his neck. But it feels serious, Rachel. I don't know what to think. Rachel paused, then said, Jason, just be there for her. She'll need you no matter what's going on. Don't let this push you two further apart. Jason nodded, even though Rachel couldn't see him. I'm trying, he said softly. They hung up and Jason returned to the waiting room, feeling a little steadier but still anxious. After what felt like hours, a nurse came back to get him. Mr. Jason, you can see Rebecca now, she said with a gentle smile. Jason followed her down the hallway and into Rebecca's room. Rebecca was sitting up in bed, her eyes brighter than before. Hey, you look like you've aged 10 years waiting out there, she teased, trying to lighten the mood. Jason chuckled, sitting down beside her. That's what happens when you make me worry like that, he replied. Did they tell you anything? Rebecca hesitated for a moment, then said, The doctor came in earlier. She said they're looking at something that might explain everything, but they're still not sure. She mentioned something about my blood. Jason frowned. Your blood? What could that mean? Rebecca shrugged, her expression serious now. I don't know, but they're running more tests. Honestly, Jason, I'm scared. Jason reached for her hand, holding it tightly. We'll figure this out, Beck. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Rebecca smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't pull her hand away. For the first time in a long time, they felt like a team again, even if the circumstances were far from ideal. Just as Jason was about to say something else, the door opened, and the doctor walked in. She held a folder in her hands and looked at both of them with a calm but serious expression. Rebecca, Jason, the doctor began, we have some results. I think it's time we talk about what's going on. The room felt heavier as the doctor pulled up a chair to sit with them. She opened the folder, glancing briefly at the pages before speaking. Rebecca, she began gently, the blood tests we ran showed something unusual. Your red blood cell count is much lower than normal, and there are markers that suggest this might be more than just a simple issue. Rebecca furrowed her brow. What does that mean exactly? Is it something serious? She asked, her voice calm but tinged with concern. The doctor nodded slightly. It could be. One of the possibilities we're looking into is a condition called aplastic anemia. It's a rare disorder where your body doesn't produce enough blood cells. But please understand, this is not a confirmed diagnosis yet. We'll need to do a bone marrow biopsy to be sure. Jason's heart sank. He didn't know much about medical terms, but even the sound of biopsy made his stomach turn. How soon can you do that? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. We can prepare for it tomorrow, the doctor replied. For tonight, Rebecca needs rest. The biopsy will help us understand what's happening and how best to treat it. Rebecca leaned back on her pillows, processing the information. So, if it is this aplastic anemia, what happens then? She asked softly. The doctor hesitated before answering. There are treatments, including medications, blood transfusions, or in more serious cases, a bone marrow transplant. But let's take it one step at a time. For now, focus on resting and staying strong. Rebecca nodded, her face thoughtful. After the doctor left the room, Jason stayed quiet for a long time. He wasn't sure what to say, but he knew he needed to be there for her. You don't have to stay, you know, Rebecca said suddenly, breaking the silence. You've already done more than enough. Jason blinked, surprised. What are you talking about? Of course I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. Rebecca looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. We're not even married anymore, she whispered. You don't owe me anything. Jason took her hand again, holding it tightly. Beck, it doesn't matter if we're married or not. You're important to me. I'm not just going to walk away when you need someone, he said, his voice steady. Rebecca smiled through her tears. Thank you, she said softly. As the night wore on, Jason sat by her side, holding her hand and talking about anything and everything to keep her mind off the looming biopsy. They reminisced about their favorite road trips, their silly arguments, and even the time Rebecca accidentally burned a batch of Jason's favorite cookies. For the first time in a long while, it felt like they weren't just two people who had drifted apart. They were two people finding their way back to something deeper. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the hospital window, casting warm golden rays across the room. Jason was already awake, sitting in the chair next to Rebecca's bed. He had barely slept, But he didn't care. He just wanted to be there for her. Rebecca stirred, blinking as she adjusted to the light. "You look terrible," she joked weakly, her voice still soft but carrying a playful tone. Jason smirked. "And yet, you can't take your eyes off me," he teased back. They both chuckled, the moment easing the tension slightly. Soon a nurse arrived to take Rebecca to the biopsy room. Jason followed, walking alongside the hospital bed as it rolled down the hallway. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady, but his eyes filled with concern. Rebecca gave him a small smile. "Not really, but I've got you, and that makes it a little less scary," she replied. Jason squeezed her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Beck. You've got this." Once they reached the biopsy room, Jason had to wait outside. Rebecca looked back at him just before the door closed, giving him a reassuring nod. Jason paced the hallway, his mind racing with thoughts about what the doctors might find. He kept reminding himself that no matter what happened, he'd stand by Rebecca. After what felt like an eternity, the nurse came out and led Jason back to Rebecca's room. Rebecca was lying in bed again, looking tired but relieved to be done with the procedure. "How are you feeling?" Jason asked, pulling up his chair next to her. "Like someone poked around in my bones," Rebecca said with a faint laugh. Jason grinned, glad to see her sense of humor was still intact. A little while later, the doctor entered the room. This time she had an air of certainty about her. She carried the folder again, holding it tightly. "Rebecca, Jason," she began, "we've completed the biopsy and analyzed the results. We're now certain of the cause of your symptoms." Jason leaned forward, holding his breath. Rebecca nodded, her face steady despite the anxiety she must have been feeling. The doctor paused, then said, "Rebecca, you have aplastic anemia. It's a rare condition, but it is treatable. We'll need to start with medications and transfusions, and we may need to consider a bone marrow transplant in the future." Rebecca exhaled slowly, processing the news. Jason squeezed her hand again. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. Rebecca looked at him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I know we will," she whispered. Rebecca and Jason's journey took them down a path they never anticipated, but somehow rediscovered together. Over the weeks, Rebecca began her treatment, starting with medication and blood transfusions. The doctors monitored her carefully, encouraging her to stay strong and hopeful. Jason became her rock. He was there for every appointment, every difficult moment, and every small victory. They spent hours in the hospital talking, laughing, and even arguing about silly things like who could recite the lyrics to old songs more accurately. It reminded them both of the bond they once had, a bond that hadn't faded despite everything. One day, as they sat in the park near the hospital during a rare moment of quiet, Rebecca turned to Jason. "You know, I didn't expect this," she said softly. Jason raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect what? That I'd be this good at crossword puzzles?" he teased, holding up the half-completed newspaper they'd been working on. Rebecca laughed. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't expect us to find this again. Whatever this is." Jason looked at her, his face serious now. "I think this is something we never really lost, Beck. We just forgot how important it was." Rebecca smiled, a warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. "Maybe you're right," she said. As the weeks turned into months, Rebecca's health improved, slowly but surely. She still had challenges to face. Some days were harder than others, but she wasn't alone. Jason was there, every step of the way, proving that sometimes even the most unexpected twists in life could lead to a second chance. Their story ends not with perfection, but with hope and resilience. Thank you for exploring this journey with me. If you ever want to create another story, let's dive in together.